The Overwatch 2 ranked meta can be very, very difficult to navigate. One game you're going up against a Winston dive, the next you're going up against a Roadhog one-tap comp, and you have no idea how to counter a composition or play a composition. So we're going to break down all of the strong comps that you can play, variations that you can have in each one, how to counter them, and keys to success. There's a lot we got to break down and talk about. But I want to thank you to the sponsor of this video, GameLeap. GameLeap is the #1 esports education platform, period, with high-quality advanced guides, tips and tricks, and concepts you won't find anywhere. GameLeap and I work together to create a super in-depth course that is going to help you improve, and there are over 100 guides made by Grandmaster or top 500 coaches on the GameLeap website, so what are you waiting for? Go check it out right now in the links down below. Now, the first meta we got to talk about is the Winston meta dive. Now, people are calling this a lot of different things, Banana Rush, or I don't know, Reaper Rush. I have no idea. It's just a dive composition with Winston, Sojourn, Reaper, Lucio, and Kiriko. This has been the Overwatch League composition played the most at the pro level, and the idea behind this composition is that you play together. No one on your team can get dove because every single one of you has mobility. You bait out cooldowns by playing off angles with Sojourn and Kiriko, fish for one-taps and damage, and then you commit onto the enemy when you have more resources than the opponent because you baited them out by pressuring out Amp, by pressuring out Teleport, by pressuring out Suzu or Reaper Fade, whatever the case may be. After you have an advantage over the enemy, that's when you capitalize on them. Now, there can be variations with this composition. Characters like Reaper can be replaced by Tracer or other characters with mobility. Characters like Kiriko can be replaced with Moira, some character that doesn't provide as much value, but it's a lot easier to play, and it also is a character that can't be dove very easily. The idea behind this comp, though, is that nothing on your comp is a diveable target. If you have this composition, but you have a random Zen or maybe an Ana, if the enemy doesn't see that and capitalize on it, then sure, you could get away with it. But the reality is that is a vulnerability in the comp because the comp's whole identity is it's a mobile comp that can't be easily dove or punished, and it can kind of move as a glob together until they commit on a full dive when they actually have adequately baited out enough resources on that enemy. Now, I will say that this composition is pretty hard to play in a ranked environment. While you definitely could play it the higher in ranked you climb, it's hard because all the pieces have to be in coordination and the communication kind of needs to be on point. So you're less likely to run up against or play this comp in your ranked games. But here's a comp that you are likely to play, the Sigma Poke composition. Now, there's a ton of variation to this comp, so I'm just going to kind of name some of the characters that can typically be played. Sigma, Kiriko, Zen, Mercy, Sojourn, a Widow, a Hanzo, an Ashe, an Echo. There's a ton of variations here, and the idea behind this composition is it's centered around Sigma, and you're poking and basically developing a huge resource advantage before you go and close the fight. So the Sigma has to slowly give space as you build that advantage. So a Sigma will kind of start up close, but as like a Zarya or a Rein or whatever character that's trying to duel him takes a little bit of a step closer to him, he's backing up, never getting into the optimal range of that other tank, and all of his teammates are trying to develop picks or an advantage of some kind. Like their Widow's taking pot shots, the Sojourn's trying to get rails off, the Zen's trying to frag out with Orb. Whatever the case may be, the Sigma's job is to stay alive and back up and give space, while the rest of his team is just outputting pressure and damage. And then if you get picks, or if the enemy's super low or weak or has no shield or has no resources, then you can push in and close it and capitalize on it and finish it off. But the trick to success with this composition is making sure that you don't utilize a lot of your abilities until you have to. So like Sigma Rock, for instance, let's say you're up against a Rein and you're like, okay, I'm just going to throw this rock just randomly because I just want to throw it randomly. And the Rein just shields it off and then he charges at you. And now you don't have a rock when he's on top of you. So when you were far away from him, just chilling, vibing in the poke situation that you wanted to be, you were basically just throwing your abilities out for no reason, and then you don't have it when the enemy tries to close that gap onto you, which means you're probably going to die. So basically, you're only incentivized to utilize your abilities when you're not in a comfortable position based on your comp. Now, if we're thinking about the support lineups for this composition, we don't play characters like Lucio because we're not trying to speed into engage. While you could hypothetically speed out to disengage, it's not enabling the composition in the same way as it would be enabling like a Brawl composition. Instead, you want characters that can aid to the poke and pressure. You can technically play characters like Baptiste as well that are just outputting damage. Kiriko's fantastic for outputting damage herself. Zen, like I said, crazy good at outputting damage. Mercy can pocket many of the different DPS that can poke from distance. And the key to winning with this composition is just making sure that you are properly positioning so that the enemy never gets to get on you without you doing substantial damage utilizing your range. So if the dive composition can jump on you and y'all did no damage to them, you're probably gonna lose. If the Brawl composition touches you and y'all haven't killed someone or got someone low or made them use all their abilities, you're probably gonna lose. It's about utilizing your range advantage while you have it so that it's easier to fight an enemy when they get into their range, and conserving cooldowns for that inevitability as well. Now let's talk about the most common type of composition that you're gonna go up against in ranked, and it's the one-tap meta, the Roadhog one-tap meta. Now, Roadhog can kind of be played with any composition in ranked because of the nature of the character, but the true way to access the Roadhog meta is by combining a Hog with a Lucio and a Kiriko. The idea here is you have a Lucio that could speed around a Hog wherever he needs to go and the rest of the team, and a Kiriko that could bail a Hog out of danger by cleansing him. So it makes the Hog capable of easily leaving or engaging and one-tapping at a moment's notice, and it also means that you can overwhelm and protect. So sleeps don't work, nades don't work, any CC on the Hog can just get wiped away, and you could overwhelm with a one-tap and just win the fight very, very, very quickly. Now, I think you could definitely get away with not running a Lucio, at least in ranked with the Hog, but you really can't get away with not running a Kiriko, especially if there's things that are trying to shut down a Hog, or if you're in the Hog mirror and the enemy has like an Ana and a Kiriko or something like that, and you don't have a Kiriko, good freaking luck playing a Hog. Now, as far as the DPS that play good with and against this, there's a lot of them. I mean, you really want to play DPS that can kind of get solo pick value, DPS that can also get one-taps themselves. So, hypothetically, characters that can either ignore the Hog or have a means to get away from him. Characters like Tracer are good. Characters that one-tap like Sojourn are good. Widowmaker that can play from a distance. Even a character like Genji is fine. Characters like Reaper that have a means to dodge hook and execute with the team and also benefit from Kiriko and Lucio. There's a lot of different characters you could play, honestly, but I would say don't play characters that have a slower time to kill or a more attrition-based time to kill, because you are not getting a crazy amount of value if you're not bursting your target very quickly down when you are engaging onto them. So like a character like Sim, for instance, might not be that great with or against a Roadhog. Now, the next composition that we got to talk about is the Reinhardt Brawl composition. And this is basically just a Reinhardt that wants to get up close and personal to an enemy, beat them down, and do a ton of damage. Now, there are several characters that, combo really well with Ryan, and some are even necessary. I would say the number one most important character in this composition is a Lucio. You need a means to either collapse onto a winning fight or back away from a losing fight. And Lucio enables that. Without a Lucio, it's pretty hard to play Ryan, because then you can't really engage when you need to or want to. Now, as far as the other support is concerned, you could play a lot. You could probably play Ana or Moira. I think you could maybe get away with playing a Kiriko too. It's a little bit weird because the Kiriko would have to prioritize healing a little bit more. But if she does, she would get a lot more rushes because she'd build up her ultimate faster. And then you could do Rush Rhine, which would be really strong. But as far as what would play with the Rhine, you want characters that occupy a mid to close range. Those type of characters that can fight up in that range ballpark. Reaper, Cassidy, Sojourn. You won't really want to dive characters, so characters like Tracer and Genji won't combo all that great, but Reaper can brawl on the front line, so he works a lot better with Rhine. Now, Brawl doesn't have to be played with the Rhine either. Characters like Zarya and Orisa can also play well, But the biggest mistake that Reinhardt Brawl comps are making is that they use all their resources to get in close, and then they fight an enemy when they have no resources. So like, as an example, let's say you're like up against a Sigma comp or a Roadhog comp, and you're like, okay, I want to take the fight to them. I want to get up close. I want to swing my hammer. I want to build up ult charge, and I want to brawl, right? But by the time you get to them, you had to use a lot of your shield and your resources. So you have low HP. Your Ana used her nade, or your Moira used her freaking heal. Your Lucio already used his amp up. Your Cassidy already used his roll, and you have no shield and you're low, and then you finally get up to the enemy. Now, maybe you're in the optimal position now. You're on top of the freaking Sigma, or you're on top of the Roadhog, or whatever. You're on top of their team, but because you took the most clear direction route there, like the straight line direction there, you played in the enemy's range, effective range, for too long. So by the time you're there, you're too weak, you're too low, you're gonna get freaking bullied. And it's important that you move around the terrain and the map and try to save as much of this as possible, so that when you're actually on top of the enemy, your entire team has the most amount of cooldowns as possible, and you're likely to win out that brawl. That's how you leverage your advantage, your range advantage, not like trying to just get there. Don't just try to just get there. You're just gonna die. And this is really the mistake of a lot of these compositions, is like with the dive, right? You don't want to actually just use all your cooldowns and all your healing cooldowns and all your DPS cooldowns just to touch the opponent in a dive, right? You want to have those for after the dive is already engaging, not for just to even touch them, just to get to them. That's not what you want to do, because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter who has what advantage in what situation. If your team is low on health and low on resources, you're gonna lose. That's just the way it is. So it's really important that you play into the optimal strengths, play the optimal characters that go with these compositions, and be willing to adapt on the fly. Now, as far as some alterations are concerned, I think there's a number of different characters people are curious about. Wrecking Ball, for instance, that type of dive is going to be more sporadic. You got a Wrecking Ball, and the specific dives all center around Wrecking Ball, but in order to follow up on that, you need characters that can basically enter the fight and exit the fight on a whim. So characters that have true mobility, characters that have the ability to contribute from distance. So like a Widow, an Echo, a Tracer, a Genji, a Reaper. These are the type of characters you would want to have with a Wrecking Ball. If you have someone that's like a hit scan, like a Cassidy, he can't really engage in the way you want him to, and he can't leave when you want him to. If he's trying to engage with a slam, then he's stuck and he can't leave, and he has no team to go back to, because that's another thing about Wrecking Ball comps. There will be no central force for the team. The team is all over the place. The team is sporadic. The positioning's sporadic. So you can't just assume that you'll be able to back out to any place that is safe. Another composition is like a diva composition, which can be a combination of a dive or a flexible style with peeling. So diva, unlike Winston, oftentimes will peel or contest. So if there's a hit scan on the high ground, a diva will contest or potentially kill. If there's teammates that need help, she'll go back and peel using her defense matrix. So diva can play this flexible style, but she kind of does what is needed to be done at any moment. Sometimes she's brawling with her team. Sometimes she's fighting and diving in. Sometimes she's just contesting by herself. Sometimes she's playing a more sporadic playstyle. There's a lot of different variations of diva, and because of that, the DPS and supports that can be played with diva is a lot larger. Like, the amount you can play is a lot larger, because it's up to the diva to adapt her playstyle around her DPS picks, rather than the DPS picks to adapt themselves around the diva, unless the diva is trying to like full commit to a dive. Like, if the diva is literally like going in and full committing to a dive every single time, then you probably want characters that can follow that up. But the diva doesn't have to play that way. The diva can actually change her playstyle, as opposed to, back to the Cassidy example, can a Cassidy just choose the dive if he like with his team? No, he can't just choose the dive. But a diva can. A diva can choose the dive, or she could go an entire game where she doesn't really dive in the same traditional sense as a Winston does. So that's what I'm talking about. She has that flexibility and alterations in the potential gameplay. And then last up, the last alteration we got to talk about is Doomfist. You pick this character and you lose. Okay, sorry. I'm sorry. All right. All joking aside, Doomfist, a little bit more sporadic like Wrecking Ball, but it's a little bit complicated. And we don't really know like the perfectly optimal way to play with the Doomfist, if I'm being honest. You probably want DPS that can go in and out on the fly. Sojourn, Soldier, Tracer, Genji, Reaper, these type of DPS most likely. But it's going to kind of depend, I guess. So anyways, if you have any questions about this is your, composition guide for Overwatch 2. But thank you so much for coming by. Hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you next time.